It was 2 weeks ago today that I finished my Camino, my walk across Spain, and walked into the area of the sanctuary of Compostela, the Santiago de Compostela, the place of St. James. My official Compostela says I walked 778 kilometers or 484 miles in those 5 weeks from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in France to Santiago de Compostela in Spain. This way, this pilgrimage has been a pilgrimage for 1,000 years for the people of God. They've wandered through these lands to the place of St. James. And one of the scriptures I leaned on each day as I walked came from the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures. I would listen and hear the echo and say these words out loud from Isaiah chapter 30 and verse 21. We'll put them on the screen, and I invite you to read them out loud with me. Let's read them together. Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." As I was full of anxiety and anticipation, I needed to know that as I walked this journey, that God would guide me, that I would hear occasionally, whether that was a stranger going, "Hey, the path is over here," or whether that was a sign pointing me in the direction, "This is the way, walk in it." I had hungered to do a pilgrimage. A pilgrimage is a spiritual journey, kind of body, mind, and spirit all together. It takes you typically out of your normal environment and forces you to experience the world differently. I wanted to do it kind of precisely at this time because it's been a tough couple of years for all of us. As we've endured the pandemics of COVID and gun violence and political extremism and economic disruption, the assault on the rights of women, racial tensions, we have all felt it. We have felt the tension, sometimes in our own families, sometimes in our own church, sometimes in our own community. Church leaders have felt it. There have been more retirements this year, more leaves of absence this year from clergy leaders than I've ever seen of all ages. Because it was hard to navigate these waters during this tense time. I mean, there were voices in the church that said, "Why are we open? There's a pandemic." And there were voices that were saying, "Why aren't we closed? There's a pandemic. Why aren't we open?" There were voices that said, "Why isn't everyone wearing a mask? And why are you making us wear a mask?" There were voices that said, "Why don't you ever speak to the political issues of the day?" And voices that said, "Why do you always speak to the political issues of the day?" These were the tensions we've all felt as we've tried to navigate what it means to be a follower of Jesus in awkward times. I shared with Kathy, I didn't realize this when I left, but as I got to the Camino and began to walk, I said, I realized I was vocationally exhausted. I said, I didn't realize it when I was here, because when I'm here, I love what we do. I love how we are the church. I love how we work to make a different world and a better community. But once I got there and began the rhythm of the Camino, I was like, oh yeah, solitude. I forgot you. Solitude. I was reminded how in Gospel of Luke chapter 5 and so many other places we get verses like this that say Jesus often withdrew to the lonely places and prayed. Jesus often withdrew. Solitary work is part of what we need. We need a rhythm of Sunday when we gather together and when we join our voices, whether Republican or Democrat, left or right or middle, we join our voices and we have one voice. But we also need moments of solitude where we can listen to God in new ways. So I set out 7 weeks ago to walk the Camino, and I want to share today just a few lessons learned along the way. So the Camino de Santiago is the way of St. James. The Camino has existed for 1,000+ years. It dates back to the 9th century. King Alphonsus was one of the ones who said this is an official route. When he heard that the remains of St. James the Apostle were discovered in northern Spain by a hermit named Pau, the hermit called together his bishop and said, he was led by light in the sky. It sounds like a Bible story, doesn't it? A star in the sky led him to this burial ground. The bishop said, this is the body of St. James and his followers. St. James was believed to have preached the gospel in Galatia and then later returned to Jerusalem, where he was killed by the state by King Herod Agrippa in 44 AD. His followers then took his remains and took them back to Galatia. And the discovery of his remains in 813 led to the creation of this shrine in Santiago, St. James, Santiago. If you go to the shrine, you will see in the basement of the shrine the tomb of St. James and the silver box holding the relics of St. James. The first guidebook about walking the Camino was written in 1100. So for almost 1,000 years, people have been walking the Camino. So here's the first lesson for you and for me. You can do hard things. We sometimes need to remind ourselves in the midst of life, I can do hard things. And that first day of the Camino, we began with a beautiful morning. I got to my albergue the night before, and they said, Duane, we've been expecting you, which is a great way to be greeted, isn't it? We've been expecting you. Then she said, we were all going to get up at 6 a.m. Breakfast will be ready. There'll be toast. There'll be jam. There'll be coffee. There'll be breakfast cake, which was new. She blessed us that morning after we had our breakfast, said a prayer, and then she played a John Denver tune. This German in France played a John Denver tune, Sweet Surrender. And the chorus says, sweet, sweet surrender, live without care, like a fish in the water, like a bird in the air. Now, almost all West Virginians, when they hear John Denver, are taken home. And whenever I would go, people would say, as you had conversation, where were you born? I'd say West Virginia. And whether they were German or Spanish or French or Italian, they would say, country roads, mountain mama. And I would say, yes, yes. I think our host that day was trying to say to us, surrender to the Camino. You may think you know why you're here, but surrender to the walk and let the walk speak. It would be a journey of over 1 million steps that began at the foot of the Pyrenees in this beautiful town, Saint-Jean. It's a beautiful French little town right on the river in the valley. And then day one is 16-mile hike up in heavenly scenery in the Pyrenees. But day one, you don't know your pack. This is my pack. You don't know your pack well. You don't know your pace. You don't know where you're going to sleep or where you're going to eat. You don't know what you don't know yet. And so day one can be a challenging day. 4,000 feet climb. I've run Roby Creek. I've done marathons. I've done half marathons. But I would tell you 2 hours into climbing the Pyrenees, I was thinking, what was I thinking? Not having my pack fully adjusted to my body, watching people that seemed older and more infirm than me pass me. I had to stop and say, I got to find my pace. And I remember thinking, well, you'll be 58 years old next month. Take 58 steps and then breathe. So at the steepest point, I would take 58 steps and stop and breathe. And I'd take 58 more steps and I would stop and breathe. And I would take 58 more steps and I would say to myself, I can do hard things. And I would kind of reach deep within and pull out scriptures like Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I would say to myself, I can do this. I can do this. And I remember talking to a young man who had climbed many of the highest mountains in the world, and he said, Duane, there are some places when it's this steep, your walk doesn't even look like a walk. He said, you have to take a step that just looks like this. And you're moving forward. And I was like, I'm not going that slow. But I get what you're saying. Find low gear. Find low gear, wherever that is for you. And keep moving, but walk at a pace that allows you to breathe. The Camino is an interesting way, and you'll hear this pretty quickly on the journey. People will say to you, Duane, the way will provide. And it's not like it's magical, like I need a raincoat, poof, a raincoat. It's not like that. But there's this sense that because you're on a journey with people from all over the world, if you have a need, someone will help you. The way will provide. And I remember that first day, only a couple of hours into the hike into the mountains, all of a sudden, there was this, what I started to call the mythical food trucks. They would just appear in unexpected places where you weren't expecting. It's not on the map. It's not on the app. It doesn't say there's going to be a place to eat here, and then there would be a mythical food truck in the middle of nowhere. And they'd have hot coffee and breakfast or second breakfast, and they would be ready to take care of you. Often they were people who had walked the Camino before, and they recognized this was kind of a lonely place. And if they could get there and serve, maybe they could make it better for others. I remember my sister and I got to one time, and we had hiked a day, and we were really tired, and we came up over a hill, and there was just like an oasis. There were 2 tables set with fruit and cheese and meat and cold juice and hot coffee and hot tea, and there was nobody there, just a little sign in a box that said, take what you need, and if you can leave a donation, leave a donation. And I began to think, the way does provide. The way provides. It shows up in some unique way. You eat, you sleep, you walk, but the way provides. Each day you stay in a hostel or an albergue is the name. Some are run by churches, some are run for profit, some are run on donations. I got to the albergue in Roncesvalles and said, do you have a bed? And they said, yes. That was the first day after about 7.5 hours of walking. Do you have a bed? Yes. The way provided. In his book, The Great Spiritual Migration, How the World's Largest Religion is Seeking to Be Better, a Better Way to Be Christian, Brian McLaren says this: the Christian religion has been around for 2,000 years. And as far as I know, we have no well-conceived pedagogy of love or no love curriculum. And he goes on to say, why not? Why haven't we developed a curriculum of love as the Church of Jesus? And I remembered that quote on the Camino, and I remember thinking, this is close. The Camino is really close to a curriculum of love, because you're walking with people of all ages, all religions, all faiths, and they're caring for each other. There's always a place to eat, a place to sleep, a place to worship, a place to be community. I think it's close to a school of love. One of my favorite things on the Camino was when people would greet you, and you hear it again from day one on, or as soon as people recognize your pack, if they see the seashell, which is a sign you're a pilgrim on the way, they would say to you, Buen Camino. Buen Camino. Not just the pilgrims, the people who ran the restaurants, Buen Camino. Or sometimes the little old ladies in these ancient towns, as they watched every pilgrim, they'd greet every pilgrim, Buen Camino. Buen Camino. Good way. Good way. Good way. The way will provide. So I was in the town of Lograno, a great little town in Spain. It had been a long day, about 28 kilometers that day, 17 miles. And a friend who was only walking for a week. Some people only walk for a week. Some people walk for a day. Some people do the whole thing. Friend Bill from Santa Fe, he was at the end of his week, and he said, let's get dinner tonight, let's connect. I said, I'd love that. He said, let's get tapas. This town's known for great tapas. I said, fantastic. I was staying in an albergue. He was staying in a hotel, and albergue, kind of 50, 60, 100 people, depending on the size in your place staying. And they kind of have norms of albergues, right? 10 o'clock at night, we lock the door, we turn the lights off, you unplug, go to sleep. You're a community. We're all walking. So you have to learn to live together. But they change occasionally, depending where you are. So I checked the albergues I left, and the time was written there. We locked the door, we closed the door at 2200. Now, those of you in the military, what time is that? 10 o'clock. My Camino brain went 2200, half, 11 o'clock. I just didn't think through it. We went out to dinner, had a great dinner. I came back about 10:30, and the courtyard gate is locked with a big chain. Now I look at the gate and I think, I can climb that. So I climb the gate, which gets bigger every time I tell the story. It's at least 12 foot this time, right? I climb the gate, I get over the gate, I go to the front door, and they're chain locked. And I thought, oh, come on. There has to be a dummy clause here somewhere, right? I can't be the only one who's ever shown up late. And so I got my flashlight out on my phone, and I'm looking for like the number to call if you're a dummy. And I can't find anything, and I'm thinking, well, this is going to be interesting. I could sleep here, in the courtyard, I guess, but it's hot, and all my stuff's inside. I thought my friend Bill's in a hotel room. He could get a guest tonight, might be me. And then I looked up, which isn't a bad thing to do when you're in crisis. I looked up, and there was a balcony, and there were 2 or 3 guys on the balcony. So I went, is there any chance someone could open the door? And they looked down and went, where did you come from? I said, you didn't see me climb the fence? No. They were like, we can open the door on the other side of the building, but you'll have to climb the fence to come around. The way provides, but sometimes you got to climb the fence. My sister and I were walking from Villafranca to Osabrio, and as we walked, we had the booklet said the next town there'd be a place open for breakfast. It was a Sunday morning, and we got there and it wasn't open, and we were a little hungry. So we kept walking, and we didn't have any food with us that day, and we're walking along an old interstate there in Spain, and my sister at one point says, did you see the donuts? I said, the donuts? She said, back on the road, there's 2 donuts. And I turned around and I went, the way will provide. My friends were like, what is he doing? I jumped the guardrail, went and got the donuts. They were in a packet. They were still sealed. And I just said, thank you, Lord. And we had donuts for breakfast. The way will provide. One last day, we stopped in a town called Burgos. We had just come from Burgos, and almost every day you have a chance in these small towns. There's chapels or places of worship, sometimes cathedrals, and most of the time they're open, and you can go in and you can just take in the ambiance. You can light a candle. You can be present. Sometimes there's a host or a priest or a nun present. And there was this little chapel outside of Burgos, and I almost didn't stop because it wasn't a great cathedral. But there was something that said, stop. So I said to my sister, let's go look. So we went in, and there were candles lit, and there were 2 little French nuns. And one was in prayer at the front, and the other was just blessing anyone who wanted to receive a blessing in French. And I knew immediately, I need your blessing. So I waited in line until it was my turn, and this little French nun held my head in her hands, and she touched my heart. And she held my head in her hands, and she touched my heart. And she said everything in French, and my 6th grade French didn't help me out much. And then she handed me a necklace with Mother Mary on it, and I knew she was blessing me and sending me on my way, as she said, Buen Camino. And I knew she was sending me with Mary watching over me. Now, the truth is, I don't know what she said. She could have said, there's nothing up here and there's nothing in here. But what I received was a blessing. regardless of what she said, I received the blessing that she was offering to continue the good way. One of the lessons learned is what you carry impacts your walk. This was my friend on the journey. It was about 15 pounds. Most people have a shell. In the ancient days, 1,000 years ago, when people walked this, they would pick up a shell when they were done on the seashore of Spain, and that would be a sign that I was a pilgrim. These days, people start with a shell, and it's a sign that you are a pilgrim. I added a cross from the walk to Emmaus and a rainbow cross specifically. So if anybody was behind me, I was hoping they could hear the voice of God say, everyone matters to God. All people matter. And so that was kind of part of my journey. Now, part of what you learn is as you carry this pack, it becomes part of you. And all the guidebooks say, take less than you think you need. Take less. Why? Because you're going to carry it. And so usually on day one, almost everybody's going, as they look through their pack, what can I get rid of? Even if you think you've been minimalist, 2 shirts, two change of clothes, 2 pairs of shoes, you start thinking, what don't I need? And so day one, I was like, I got a pair of gloves. They're gone. I don't need those. I got 3 pair of socks. I don't need 3. 2 will work. I got 3 chapsticks. Who needs chapstick? I gave 2 away. Right? I had 2 guidebooks. I only need 1 guidebook. Somebody else gets blessed with 1. Right? You leave as much as you can. Why? Because you're carrying it. And you learn how simply you can live. How simple we could live if we had to carry everything we owned. The other thing that happens, if you have to carry everything you own, you don't want for anything else. Even in a foreign country where we tend to look for exotic things to bring home, something to remember. I didn't want a trinket. I didn't want a T-shirt. I didn't want a sweatshirt. I didn't want a bumper sticker. I didn't want anything I had to carry because that was going to add to my weight. And so isn't it interesting? What if we lived in a way that said we don't have to take stuff from wherever we are, but we already have enough? What are you carrying that maybe is in the way of your walking with God? And it's how quickly it changes. Right? Last weekend, first weekend home, I stopped at my favorite thrift store, came home with 5 shirts. And then it hit me. Why did you buy 5 shirts? And I thought, because I got them for under $20. And I thought, but you didn't need 5 shirts. So then I had to go to my closet and go, how do I get rid of 6? Right? I don't need to carry this. What would simplified life look like? Another lesson from the journey is be kind to people on the way. You'll probably see them again. And people walk differently than you do. They may walk faster, they may walk slower. The Camino is full of people that rest, people that walk. It's full of cafe owners and people who live in the cities and towns along the way. People on the Camino includes those who live along this historic pilgrimage. It includes the bicyclists that pass you and you think are going to mow you down. It includes the people that are limping with blisters, the slow walkers, and those who think the Camino is a race. It includes all ages, sizes, languages, religions, but we're all on the same road, all headed to the same destination, all in our own time. We eat, laugh, sleep, cry, worship. We become community. I've never experienced quite anything like it. Maybe the last lesson of the Camino today would be that the way takes many different forms. Some days it's a paved road, some days it's a dirt road, some days it's a grass path, some days you're walking through beautiful vineyards, some days you're in the Meseta, which is the kind of the plain, some days you're in the mountains, some days you're by a river, some days you're in the industrial zone of a major city, and it's not very pretty at all. The Camino takes many, many different forms, but they all lead to the same place. Again, whether you're walking with poles or pulling a cart, whether you're carrying your pack or sending it ahead, we were all on the same journey. On day 24, you pass a place, or for me it was day 24, I passed the cross de Ferro, which means the iron cross. And there's been a cross on the path for over 1,000 years. different crosses. And pilgrims traditionally pick up a stone from their home and they carry it to the place of the iron cross. If you didn't get one home, typically you get it on the first day. Somewhere on the journey, you just pick up a stone. And it's kind of a burden, right? What's this burden that I'm carrying? And you give God a few weeks to kind of walk with you and talk to you about it. And what is it I need to let go of to fully live my Camino? And so, not to be outdone, I had 3 stones, all right? And so when I got there to the cross, I was able to leave those 3 challenges and say, God, I really do want to leave these here so that I can more fully be yours and continue the journey. I mean, there are thousands of stones there. What do you need to leave behind in order to fully live your Camino? The Camino invites you to reorder your life, right? To think through life differently. So we're reminded you can do hard things. The way will provide. What we carry impacts our walk. We are to be kind to people in the way. The way takes many forms. Buen Camino. Let's pray together. I'll put this prayer up on the screen, and it's a prayer that we prayed multiple times in various places as part of our Camino walk, so pray with me. Dear Lord, you took your servants, Abraham and Sarah, out of their homeland, protecting them in all their pilgrimages and wanderings. You who guide us through the desert, we ask you also to watch over your children who make our daily pilgrimage on the way. Be for us our companion on the journey, our guide in the crossroads, our strength and fatigue, our shelter in the time on the way, our relief in the heat of the day, our light in the storm. Comfort us in our discouragement, strengthen us in our intentions. May we arrive safe at the end of our pilgrimage, strengthened, changed, and empowered to love as we return home. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.